Hey, welcome back to Legal Eagles right here on 1590 AM WCGO. And my name is William Pelarenos. I'm host for the show. And today I have Illinois State Senator Robert Martwick is our guest. Thank you for coming to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yes. Robert Martwick, you've got a well-rounded career. You started out as a prosecutor, then you became a private attorney, then you got elected as a state rep. Now you're a senator, correct?
I am a senator. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. So, I have had a long career, both in the law as a criminal prosecutor, and then got involved in politics. Was a village trustee in the village of Norwich, and became a state rep. Served there for 7 years, and became a state senator. Funny thing is, people often ask me. They'll say, what job had the best prepared you for politics?" And the funny thing is, I say, not the law. Don't get me wrong, the law is very important because, of course, having that background to understand the legal implications of the bills that you write and such is very important. But the job that most prepared me for having a successful career in the legislature, and I laugh a little bit, but I'm kind of serious, was being a bartender.
Because you dealt with people.
You dealt with people, and, people come in and more times than not, they're not just there. They're there because they're happy. They're there because they're sad. They're there because they're upset about something. And more times than not, they're talking to you. And so you learn to listen to people's problems. And the legislature is that same sort of situation. We try and identify problems. I don't know all the problems that are going on in the world. I have a very small, field of view. So when I talk to people and they say, "Hey, there's a problem with this. Can you help?" Then it's, once you've got to identify the problem, then the legislature is all about trying to find solutions. So, it's funny that, I tell people who want to run for office all the time, it's not about what career you have. It's the experience that you gain from those different walks of life that help you when you get to the legislature.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, I remember when I was a policeman, you prosecuted quite a few of my cases. You were a Cook County prosecutor for, what was it, about 5 years?
I was 5 years in the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. I started out in child support enforcement, and then I moved over to Skokie and the 2nd Municipal District, where I prosecuted general criminal prosecutions, misdemeanor level, but I also spent 18 months as the lead prosecutor in the domestic violence unit in the Skokie Courthouse as well. So I did that, and then I wound up transferring over to the civil division, where I worked on real estate matters before I went into private practice.
When you went into private practice, was it criminal?
No, it's all been real estate. I've not done any criminal in private practice. I have a great deal of respect. I think it's it's an essential part of the process that we have, that there is a vigorous defense for those people who've been accused of a crime. It just, some people make that transition easily. It just wasn't something I just didn't want to do it. I liked prosecuting, and I wanted to go and do something different.
Oh, I understand.
Yeah.
So how long, I know you got elected as a state rep, and you just moved into the Senate. How long were you a state rep for?
I was a state rep for 5 years, 7 years. I was elected in 12, so I took office in January of 19, and I served 7 terms in the legislature, in the House of Representatives. And then there was a vacancy. My predecessor, Senator John Mulrow, was appointed to become a judge. It opened up a vacancy, and I was chosen to replace him.
Well, very good, very good. So, but see, you've got a well-rounded career. So you've seen the criminal aspect, and as a private attorney, you've seen the problems with real estate, and you've put in some, we're going to talk about this, some tax bills, homeowners exemptions, seniors exemptions, something like that. And you've also put in other House bills as well as Senate bills, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very proud of the 7 years I had in the House. It was a very aggressive 7 years. We advanced a lot of legislation, and some of it I think quite profound. So one of the things I'm most proud of is something I did in last General Assembly. You mentioned it. Everyone knows that taxes are a problem here in Illinois, and the reasoning's pretty simple, right? We are one of the highest, I think we are the highest debt state in the country. And you just can't have low taxes and enormously high debt. We owe our pension systems we didn't put our money in. So we have to find a way to pay that back. And I think most people understand that. They understand. They don't like it. Nobody should. I don't like it. I didn't create the problem. I'm just trying to solve it. But they understand that you've got to pay these debts back, but they want it to be done fairly. And our property tax system has really been taking it to the middle class, and we needed some relief. So 2 years ago, I put in a bill that raised homeowners exemptions, raised senior exemptions, and it expanded access to the senior free. So what this does is, in a nutshell, every single homeowner in Cook County will save between $220 and $1,000 a year, depending on where you live, every year. Not just last year, not this year, but every year. Next year, the year after that, the year after that, going forward, you will save that increased amount every year off of your tax bill. So it provides real savings. If you're a homeowner in the city of Chicago, you're going to save $1,000 over the course of the next 4 years. If you're a senior citizen, twice that, $2,000 over the course of the next 4 years. And more seniors are now eligible for the senior freeze, which locks them in, keeps their tax bill from growing, and allows them to stay in their home. That helps everybody. That helps you if you're a senior. It helps you if you're not a senior. The last thing you want is you want to see seniors getting forced out of their homes. That doesn't help your property value. So this was an initiative, and it brought about real, hard-earned cash, green dollar relief for every homeowner in Cook County.
And you were the sponsor of this bill?
Yeah, I authored the bill, and I passed the bill. Worked very hard to get it passed through the legislature. It was something that I was told would never pass the legislature, but we got it done, and the governor signed it.
Very good, very good. Let's talk about some of these other taxes since we're on this subject, and we're going to go with the fair tax. You were the chief sponsor of that one, correct?
Yeah, this is another initiative. This is something that was the number one initiative of Governor Pritzker when he took office. I'm happy to say that before he ever thought about taking office or running for office, it's something that I had championed a while back. And what this does is this acknowledges the fact that in Illinois we have an inherently unfair tax system, meaning that the wealthiest people in our state literally pay half the tax rate of people who are middle class and poor. Half the tax rate, effective rate. When you add up all the taxes that they pay and you add up all the taxes that everybody else pays, our effective tax rate on the money that we earn is twice as high as the wealthiest people in our state. And Governor Pritzker knows that that's not the right way to go about things. If we want our state to thrive, we need to give the middle class an opportunity. And so a fair tax says instead of on our income taxes, and we talked about real estate tax, fair tax applies to income tax. Instead of everyone paying the exact same rate, so Illinois is one of 5 states that has a flat tax where everyone pays the exact same rate. So if you make $20,000 a year, you pay 4.95% of your income in taxes. If you make $20 million a year, you pay 4.95% of your income in taxes. So it's the exact same rate no matter what you make. So the CEO pays the exact same tax rate as the person sweeping the floors in the schools. And that's not right. So Governor Pritzker came in and he put his weight behind this initiative. And what the initiative is, it's a constitutional question. It'll appear on the ballot in November of 2020. And it says that we will eliminate the restriction in our Constitution that requires a flat tax. And we also passed a rate structure that would go along with it, a graduated rate structure. And basically what will happen, if we can get this thing passed in November of 2020, we passed it in the legislature, we have to get the voters' approval now. If that happens, anyone making $250,000 a year or less will see lower tax rates than they do today. And then if you make more than $260,000 a year, you will pay a higher tax rate, and that will raise the money that we need to properly fund education, which again gives more property tax relief. So it's a way of easing the burden on the middle class and allowing our economy to thrive.
Let me ask a quick question on that $250,000. Is that individually or filing jointly, husband and wife?
So that is $250,000 jointly. Individually, I believe the number is, oh boy, we changed this in the last second. So yeah, it's not half. It's we eliminated this quote unquote marriage penalty. So it's not the same for married as it is individual, but it's not quite half either. It's not $125,000 individually. I think it's $200,000. I'll have to get back to you on the number on that because we changed it at the last second.
It's okay. I just want to know if the 250 was individually or not.
Yeah, no, and the point is that they drew the bar very high, right? It's a very high amount of income, so that the vast majority. So basically, under this plan, 97% of taxpayers in Illinois will see lower tax rates. 97% will see lower. 3% will see higher, and as Governor Pritzker says, that's people like him will pay more taxes, and they should.
And I'm glad for that because on a state level, we needed to lower some taxes because the last year with the federal tax plan changing,
Yes.
where they only allowed you a $10,000 deduction for your state taxes, that really hurt a lot of people.
That really did, especially people who were in that middle class where they have invested in their home and they've got high property taxes because, that's it. They really put their money into their house, and because of that, they've got a higher value and a higher tax bill, and they're getting hurt by that. So this is a way of providing some relief for that, balancing the scales, providing tax relief for the middle class.
Very good, very good. We're just this year. Did you end up with a balanced budget or no?
We did. In fact, it's something I think is, so this last session was really historic. I mean, most governors come in, and if they get one big initiative passed in 4 years, that's a big deal, right? This governor got so much passed. I mean, the fair tax, legalized recreational cannabis, a gambling expansion, a capital bill, $15 an hour minimum wage, all these big initiatives. But most importantly, really, and I think because it tends to get lost in the mix of all those big accomplishments, is that we have the first truly balanced budget in 27 years. No gimmicks. And most importantly, think about it this way, right? We've got a Democratic governor. You've got super majorities in the House and super majorities in the Senate, right? You need 60 votes to pass something in the House. We have 74 Democrats. You need 30 votes to pass something in the Senate. We have 40 Democrats. So functionally, what's the relevance of the Republican Party? None, right? We don't need them to do anything. And yet, even when we least had the incentive to do it, when there was the least amount of incentive, we had the most bipartisan budget process. So there were Republican votes for the first time in my 7 years in the legislature. There were Republican votes on the budget, and they got pro-business initiatives because they engaged and because we worked with them. We found compromise to give them some pro-business initiatives, some things to help businesses grow in the state of Illinois, things that they've been after for years, and they couldn't get under Bruce Rauner, but they got them under J.B. Pritzker because they came to the table. We worked together collaboratively. Listen, when you think about Illinois and all the trouble that Illinois has to face, it's not going to get done by one party. Our problems are going to get fixed with both parties working together. And for the first time in my 7 years, both parties came together and worked together on a budget, and we passed a bipartisan budget that's actually balanced. That's a good sign for the future.
So by having a balanced budget, basically for the average listener, what does that mean? Does it mean we're going to pay our bills?
Absolutely. So we are making all of our appropriate debt service payments. We're making the actuarially required payment on our pensions. We're not only making the required payment on our backlog of bills, which is another form of debt, but we are actually paying more than we are required to pay. So trying to eliminate that debt faster, that's a good sign. Number two, we passed a capital bill, and that's a function of being able to come together and pass a budget. And that capital bill was also done in a bipartisan fashion, which is going to allow us to invest in the repair and maintenance of our infrastructure. Debt is not just a loan, right? When you don't repair your roads, that's the worst debt in the world. When you don't repair your bridges and you don't fix your sewers, that's the worst debt in the world because the cost of deferring the maintenance on your infrastructure grows exponentially. Exponentially every year that you defer. And we've been deferring for far too long. So when you have a balanced budget, you've got a functioning government. That means we're doing the basics. And when you do that, you're kind of pointing the ship back in the right direction so that you're securing the finances and moving towards a brighter future. That's why a balanced budget is so important. We went 2.5 years without a budget under Governor Rauner. Under Governor Pritzker, first thing we did, we passed not only a balanced budget, but a truly no gimmicks, actual balanced budget that invests more money in education, invests more money into paying down our debts, secures all of our necessary services.
Now, this infrastructure repair, I'm assuming that all the funds from this, or most of the funds from this, come from this accelerated gas tax?
Yeah, so there's two kinds of infrastructure we call vertical infrastructure, which is like building of buildings, and then there's horizontal infrastructure, which is what you typically think of: roads, bridges, alleys, sidewalks, water and sewer lines. So the gas tax goes into the horizontal infrastructure. It goes into our roads. So, the gas tax, of course, now, again, we'd prefer if we could invest $45 million without raising the gas taxes, but you couldn't, right? And so, no one's happy to see the gas tax go up. No one's happy, but you have to put it in perspective. The last time the gas tax was raised was 1990. So that's 30 years ago, right? Over the course of the last 30 years, it was 19 cents. It went to 38 cents. Now, if you look at the cost of a gallon of milk, the cost of a loaf of bread, or the average household income from 1990, and you compare it to 2019, everything's doubled. Everything has doubled. Income has doubled. The cost of everything has doubled. Some has more than doubled. Cost of health insurance has more than doubled. But the gas tax remained the same at 18 cents a gallon. So it went up by 18 cents to 36 cents a gallon. But here's the other part of the equation. While the gas tax remained flat at 18 cents a gallon, the cost of repairing the roads has gone up because, again, as we said, salaries have gone up. The cost of equipment and the cost of materials to pave roads has gone up. But on top of that, the federal government instituted these rules that require auto manufacturers to make more fuel-efficient vehicles. So we have hybrids and electrics that we didn't have in 1990, and we have more fuel-efficient vehicles, which means we're driving more miles on the road and bringing in less gas tax revenues. This is why there is a whole host of states that have raised their gas tax and now indexed it to inflation so that it will grow appropriately instead of one big step. But it was something we needed to do. The good news about it, as bad as it is, the good news is it's exactly where it would have been had we indexed it to inflation in 1990. So it wasn't like a huge taking. Again, no one should be happy about paying more in gas, but the good news is that it's where it should be, and indexed to inflation, you won't see a big increase anymore. It'll just creep up as it should with inflation. It's $45 million that's being invested into Illinois. It's going to create hundreds of thousands of good-paying jobs. It's going to help our economy. And best of all, right, what do people really go crazy about taxes? It's not paying them. It's when they find out that those taxes that they paid were wasted. Well, the good news about this money is we passed an initiative a couple of years ago that lock boxes this money. This money will only go into infrastructure investment and repair. So you will see it in the roads and the bridges. Illinois will improve. That will improve our economy, and it's not going to get used for any other purpose. So there is very good news there with the gas tax.
And this is a continuing gas tax. There's no window on it, correct?
No, that's permanent, and it stays there, and it'll creep up with inflation.
So as I understand it, it's $45 million extra per year because of the gas tax?
Well, not necessarily. It's not going to bring in. I'm sorry, it was $45 billion is the investment. So it won't necessarily bring all of that in. So when you do the infrastructure, you sell bonds so that you've got the $45 billion all at once, and then you use the revenue from the gas tax to pay back the bonds. Does that make sense? So that increased money from the gas tax will get put in so that you can pay it. So it's not pay as you go. You know what I mean? You have the money to do the projects and then use the gas tax to pay back.
That's why you're the legislature explaining this, because I don't understand that. Yes, well, I wanted you on here because representatives and senators put in these House and Senate bills, and you guys are the lawmakers.
That's right.
So I wanted just to discuss the laws that have come about this past year.
Absolutely, and it was a big year. There's a lot of them, right? We did a lot this year.
And the gas tax, it is a thorn in people's side because gas, to many people, they need to get to work. Excuse me. They need to get their kids to school. Their kids are driving. It's not just all recreational driving around cruising like the old days.
Yeah.
It's almost become a necessity.
It is, and like I said, that's one of those things where, the flip side of it is this, right? The bottom line is you need the money to repair the roads. We've got less money and more damage to our roads, and it's more expensive to fix them. So you've got this hole, and every state's dealing with it. Kentucky, Missouri, Indiana, everyone's raising their gas taxes, okay, to deal with it because you just have to. If you don't do it, remember I said it gets exponentially more expensive? So if we didn't do that 18 cent a gallon increase in the gas tax, If we'd have punted for another 5 years, which is what Illinois does, right? Kick the can down the road. We hear about that all the time. You do that for another 5 years, it's not like, oh, well, then it would be 20 cents a gallon. No, if you do it for another 5 years, it'd probably be like 28 cents a gallon. Do it for 10 years, it'll be 40 cents a gallon. You know what I mean? It grows exponentially. So by locking this in, you're now ensuring that future increases are tied to inflation and it grows nice and evenly because it's something we had to get ahead of. So it's no one should be happy about it, but what you can be happy about is that by doing this, we're doing the right thing so that it doesn't get out of hand in the future.
An interesting point you made when you said infrastructure repair.
Yes.
You also mentioned not only roads that we see all the time, road construction, but you mentioned sewers. So this money goes to replacing and repairing old sewers?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the infrastructure money will be, where it gets spent will be part of a long process. There'll be lots of, you don't just start salting the roads with money. You go through this process where local municipalities will write up projects. They will say, oh, we need money for this, we need money for that. And it has to be infrastructure related. It has to be shovel ready. And, it has to be a competitive bid process and all that. So we'll start going through this process and then we will submit a bill. Again, you talked about us submitting bills called an appropriation bill. And it will contain these specific line items. This is where this money is going to be spent. So right now we're going through the process of, like, I'm meeting with my mayors and my aldermen, and I'm identifying projects, and I'm starting to fill out the paperwork so that I can submit that for approval.
Well, if it repairs the sewers, it's a good thing, and I'll tell you why. And you yourself, who lives in Illinois, we get these torrential rains.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Noah's Ark type stuff, not just a rain.
Yep.
And they used to call them 100-year floods, but we get them like every 3 years. But
That's the truth.
entire towns float away.
Yep.
But a lot of times it's just that the sewers are overloaded. It may not affect a lot of areas, but once the sewers become overloaded, and then in wintertime the sewers crack because of damage, the sewers need repair. So I mean, if we can move forward with your sewer repair, do you have to add something else you said onto that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so like I said, we appropriate the money, but it's not like it's not like a blank check, right? So now that we've got the money set aside for this capital bill, now the legislators individually have to go and get these, we have to identify these projects. We have to gather all the necessary paperwork. We have to do a competitive bid process, got to get all this stuff ready so that we can then, it's just making sure that it's being spent properly, not on pet projects.
Would you be identifying it in your area? Or
Yes.
Oh, so
Yes.
the area you represent.
Well, yeah. So it's not just me. Obviously, I have a responsibility to try and identify projects in my area. But then there's money that's set aside to do things from a statewide, right? Because there are interests that are local, there are interests that affect the whole state. So like, it's not going to be up to the state representative or state senator who represents O'Hare to handle all the infrastructure needs at O'Hare, or you can imagine some other big facility. So that will be assumed as more of a statewide project.
Let me touch on another hot topic. The legalization of cannabis, it comes into effect on January 1st, correct?
January 1st, 2020, it will be legal for Illinois residents who are over the age of 21 to purchase cannabis for recreational use. So there's a small amount that you'll be able to purchase. You can't grow your own. Medical marijuana patients can grow their own, but recreational users cannot grow their own. But we passed really what I think will be a model going forward for cannabis legislation. And it is really nice that Illinois is not leading, but we're sort of towards the front of the line on this. So many times we're the last state to do anything. And so, you've got California and Washington and other states that have legalized it, but the vast majority still haven't. But the entire country of Canada has now legalized recreational cannabis. And so we decided we would go forward with this. We need the revenues, but we didn't want it to just be a money grab. We said we want this to be part of criminal justice reform, right? And so we did this through the lens of criminal justice reform and equity, meaning that we are trying to use the structure of the bill and the structure of the laws that will be crafted to provide relief to those communities that were most affected by the war on cannabis, right? If we're saying, look, having cannabis is not a bad thing, then all the people that suffered from low-level offenses, we want to give them the ability to expunge those records and wipe them off and give them a fresh start. We're using the money, the revenues that are being raised, is being invested into law enforcement. Because of course there's going to be a law enforcement component to this, and so we want to make sure that money's going to that. But it's also going to mental health and addiction counseling as well. And so I feel like it's a really good law. I'm not an expert in this. This was not my bill, but I give a lot of props to the people who worked on this. It was a real collaborative effort.
I understand.
And bipartisan as well.
Yeah, and just so our listeners understand, there was a misconception. There's been some false statements out there by some other people out there and put stuff on the internet that even though it's legalized cannabis, Illinois did not change their DUI laws. You still can't drive high under the influence of marijuana.
No, you can't.
There's really been a misconception on that. And I get a lot of emails reference it because I'm a nationally recognized DUI expert.
Yeah, and I even when I was in the state attorney's office long before the idea of even medical, let alone recreational, came up, we prosecuted driving under the influence of marijuana. There at the time there was no breathalyzer test for it, but as you know, as a police officer, you did it based on your observations that someone was impaired and could not drive, and it's those laws are still in effect. I told a funny story to someone, and I mean this all in jest, but you probably will get a kick out of this. When we were looking at medical marijuana, not recreational medical, someone came to me and said, "Oh my God, but what are you going to do with people who smoke marijuana and drive?" I said, "Well, they do that already." And they said, "Well, I know, but how are we going to catch them and think of the danger they're going to bring to our roads?" And I said, "Yeah," I said, "I actually prosecuted a lot of those cases." I said, "Do you know what the difference is between someone driving under the influence of alcohol and driving under the influence of marijuana?" And the person said, "No, I don't know. What's the difference?" And I said, "Well, the person driving under the influence of alcohol is driving 20 miles an hour over the limit. They're swerving all over the road. And when they get to the stop sign, they blast through it like it doesn't even exist, right?" I said, "The person driving under the influence of marijuana is driving 15 miles an hour below the limit. The hands at 10 and 2 straight as an arrow. And when they come to the stop sign, they stop and they wait for it to turn green." And I had cases where someone would stop and the police officer would pull up behind him and be like, "What is this guy doing?" and knock on the door and the window would roll down and the cloud would come out. And they knew what they had, right?
Yes, I know. It was like a Cheech Chong movie.
Yep.
I made enough of those arrests.
I bet you did. Bet you did.
But actually, Illinois addressed the medical marijuana issue because I've seen that they changed some of the warnings to motorists. If you're medical marijuana using, the warnings are different than the average person.
Yeah.
So if you got that medical marijuana card, there's a different application.
There is, and when we drew the medical marijuana law here in Illinois, we drew one of the strictest laws there was in the country, still is, and it was very strict. I mean, if you have a medical marijuana card and you drive while you're caught driving under the influence of marijuana, it's gone. You don't get it anymore. So it's with very strict law. So we still, these laws will operate side by side. So there still are medical dispensaries for medical use, and then now there is a recreational component as well.
For our audio law learners out there, if anybody wants to look up that cannabis law, it's House Bill 1438. That's Illinois House Bill 1438, correct?
Yeah, you can look that up on ilga.gov. ilga.gov. That's IllinoisGeneralAssembly.gov. And there's a little thing there you put in the bill number, and it'll pop up, and you can read the bill.
So one more time in that House Bill number, it's HB 1438. Now, as we're moving along, I wanted to discuss a couple other things that have been going on. And one of them, you mentioned $15 minimum wage. You said that was passed?
That was the first thing that the governor did. That was passed at the very beginning of the legislative session, so people almost forget that it happened because it signed in January. And it was literally right after he took office, and he signed the bill. So that is a minimum wage increase. It will step up over a period of years, so it's not $15 an hour immediately, but it's going to bring the whole state up. And, we had this thing where the city was at $13 an hour and everyone else was at $8 an hour or $8.25 or whatever. And so this is going to move everybody up to $15 an hour minimum wage. There's a federal move to push up the minimum wage to $15 an hour. I imagine if there is a flip in Congress, that might happen. But the idea was that we had people who were working full time and living in poverty. And that shouldn't happen in this country, right? And so this was about giving those basic workers, giving them a lift, giving them the ability. If you're going to work 40 hours a week and you're going to work 52 hours a year, you should not have to rely on government services and because you're living in poverty. And we had situations all over where companies would intentionally pay people low wages, and then they would have to go file for public assistance and food stamps and all this. This gives them a living wage, takes them out of that, brings them out of poverty, and gives them some dignity for their work. It's a good thing. Like you said, there's a nationwide push for this because when there's the belief that when you bring up the bottom and you put more money in people's pockets, they spend that, it generates economic activity. And Illinois' economy has actually been doing quite well, actually. So it's good news.
Talking about spending money, let's get to the gambling bill.
Yeah.
Well,
Baby needs a new pair of shoes.
When when does that take effect?
So it's not a hard date like that. Then there's processes that have to go through. But what happened is, so the gaming board is going to control a lot of the time. There were timelines set out to try and speed this along, but inevitably there's going to be stumbles, right? It's a big initiative. But what it will do is it will allow for a new casino in Chicago. And of course, there's been some news stories about that. A consultant is saying that, well, it's problematic the way it's drawn. So we'll see. I mean, we're going to go back to the legislature, and this is what we do. We don't try and hit home runs. I mean, you try and hit home runs, but sometimes you hit one and you see it. That one's pretty and it's going out of the park, and then it lands at the warning track. You got to go back, right? And so that's what we do. We draft the best piece of legislation we can, and then when it starts to get implemented, you see, oh, this might be a problem. That's why we come back. We have democracy. You can always fix things. So we'll see how that shakes out. But if all goes well, there will be a new casino up in Waukegan. There will be one in the south suburbs, and there'll be some movement. Plus, we legalize sports betting too, which is going to be, so now all of these options will, again, it recognizes the fact that gambling is pervasive, right? For instance, drive down to Hammond and go to the casino. Next time you do that, take a look at all the license plates in the parking lot.
Right.
They're all Illinois plates, right? And so what we're saying was, wait a minute. If people are going to gamble anywhere, what are we doing denying them here? Let's at least get that revenue. Let's use that revenue to stabilize our pension plan and repay our debts. And so we can, stem the tide of this upward pressure on taxes all the time. So it's a good idea. I think it was a good idea. It's something I supported for a long time. It's going to help secure our horse racing industry, which is good too. Again, it's not just about going to the Arlington Park and the horse track. There's a whole industry in Southern Illinois where people are raising and caring for these animals, and there's a whole industry that generates economic benefit. So it's a good investment.
I agree. And you make a good point about all these Illinoisans going to Indiana to spend their money. There's busloads. There's buses every day. They pick up people in parking lots in Illinois, and then drop them off at Indiana, and then 5 hours later you get back on the bus and they bring you back for free. Yeah. It's not for free when these people are spending their money.
That's right.
In Indiana.
That's right. And like I said, we've got big financial problems. We should not be thumbing our nose at certain revenue streams, right? So this is a way of capturing that revenue that's just going to Indiana anyway, or Wisconsin, right? People going up to Baraboo, and we're saying, look, let's keep Illinoisans. If you're going to spend that money, you're going to gamble it. At least gamble it here in Illinois. Yes,
because it's with the city of Chicago butting up to I think Hammond.
Yep.
Those casinos, for whatever it is, Horseshoe Casino or whatever.
Horseshoe, I think, is one of them. Yeah.
They busloads going every day from the city of Chicago out there, twice a day.
I'm not a gambler myself, so I've never been in any of those casinos, but is. If you go and you drive through the parking lot, you will see nothing but Illinois license
Yes,
plates.
that money's, if you're going to gamble, you're better off spending where you live, and it can go back into infrastructure or less taxes or however that works
That is
out.
right. That is absolutely right.
So we're going to get a total of 3 new casinos with this bill?
It's more than that, but in the Chicagoland area, 'cause there's some stuff that's being shifted around downstate. There's a couple of downstate communities that are going to get it. But in the Chicagoland area, we're going to see 3. You're going to see one in the south suburbs, one in Waukegan, and one in downtown Chicago.
Well, I'm glad we touched on all these subjects, especially with the gambling, the homeowners exemptions, the cannabis, the fair tax, the balanced budget. And it's important to get this message out because a lot of people don't know what's going on. They don't have time to follow the news, and sometimes the news stories on one day, not on the next.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that people have a lot of frustration with government, and I understand, right? And it's hard to follow all this stuff, and I appreciate the opportunity to come here and talk to you because these things are happening. I think that they are good things. I think we went through a period of 4 years under the prior governor where it was nothing but fighting and nothing was getting done, and people were literally dying because they were not getting services that they needed and that we could afford to provide, but we just couldn't agree on a budget. And so we've got a new governor that comes in, and we are back to running a government, and we are back to making the investments that will really help people in the middle class, lower taxes, better educational opportunities for their kids, and hopefully, we're steering that ship back in the right direction so the finances will be better for the future.
Thank you. Thank you for being on my show, Illinois State Senator Robert Martwick. And for people that don't know you, what's your new area now that you're a state senator?
Wow. So it's big. I mean, I run from I guess the way I would describe it is I'll do it by neighborhood. So I have all of the 45th Ward, 38th Ward, and 41st Ward. So that's Portage Park, Jefferson Park, Edison Park, Norwood Park, Dunning. I have all of Norridge and Harwood Heights and Schiller Park and Rosemont. And I have a large chunk of Park Ridge and little bits of Elmwood Park and Des Plaines and Niles. So it's a big district.
Huge.
Yeah, a lot of territory to cover.
Keep up the good job. Thank you for being on our show right here on WCGO 1590 AM, and I'll be back with some closing thoughts. William Pelarenos signing off. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.